People who take walks at night. What's the scariest thing you've seen? One time I turned around to see what was behind me just out of intuition. And I saw someone step behind a tree rather quickly and try to hide from me. I stood there for a second to confirm this. Then I speed walked home. Frockin' creepy. I almost got kidnapped near a train station. Some dude drove up to me hella quick and insisted that I was some missing Canadian child, and that he'd take me home. Coincidentally, a motorcycle cop happened to drive by, and immediately pulled over after I waved him down. He approached the guy in the car very aggressively and told him off. The cop didn't arrest the guy or anything. The guy apparently told the cop the same. I thought he was a missing child story, but he did walk me over to the train station and stayed with me until the train actually arrived. I'm an overnight security guard. One night I was watching cameras and saw someone underneath a grass tarp where some landscaping was taking place on our property. I was guessing this person had probably tried to stash something before they went into detox, which is next door to our property. I get over to the tarp and don't see the guy anywhere. So I start walking over the tarp and lifting it to look for any stashed items. Well, I ended up stepping on the poor homeless guy. Scared the shit out of me. He was cool though, and we fist bumped and he went on his way. I worked night shift for 7 years. One night a young, thin blonde woman was walking down the street at 2 a.m. with no pants or underwear on and a button-up shirt open. I tried to ask if she needed help and she just stared forward. Slowly walking, staring forward. I called the police and they came and stood in front of her, and she slowly walked into the cop's hand and stopped. I didn't stay and went back to work. I still think out her and what the frock was going on. I tell myself it was sleepwalking on Ambien or something, and that she wasn't just assaulted and in complete shock. I'll never know, but she was very pretty, and seemed well groomed, was very strange. One time I was walking around my relatively safe neighborhood with 2 of my friends after midnight. We were probably 16 at the time. This loud red truck speeds by us, which is normal for the road we were on. Then a few minutes later the same red truck drives by the opposite way going much slower. Again just a couple of minutes later he drives by, but this time stops 100 or so feet away from us and just sits there. Realizing that this is not normal, we booked it through the yard to the next street over. For the next 20 or so minutes we see this truck creeping up and down the neighborhood while we hid behind some bushes, and when we finally thought he was gone, we booked it to my house. He turned the corner onto my road just as we were about to open my front door. Dead body on the side of the street with a sign around its neck saying, "I'm a cell phone thief, don't be like me." This was maybe 20 years ago in Manila, Philippines. Found a guy who hanged himself in a park. Called 911 and answered some questions. Was a long night. I changed hung to hanged. Was up on a hill in the countryside at midnight when a man with a rifle came out of nowhere, ran right past me, and wasn't seen again. I went home shortly after that. Almost 100% sure I witnessed a kidnapping. I was going to get my mail late at night while living in an apartment complex, and on the way back I noticed a woman in her pajamas surrounded by a few men right by a car. There was an argument and looked like they forced her in the car and drove off. I found her slipper nearby on the grass. I of course called the police and they came and I let them know what I saw, but I never found out what actually happened. I worked night shift on Kadena AB on Okinawa, Japan. I started walking to work because I didn't have a car. I really enjoyed the walks. It was a good way to wind down after work as the nights were cool and quiet and I could listen to my music without worrying about anyone else around. One night while walking home I heard some rustling in the jungle of trees on the way home. Next thing I know all of the lights went black and all I felt was a loud whoosh coming right at my head. I screamed like a little girl, ran, and dropped my iPod. It broke. Once I made it past the trees I realized it was one of the giant bats that lived on Okinawa. It scared the ever-living shit out of me. What I thought was a body in the woods. And after a bit of back and forth on the phone with the police I returned with a few helpful coppers to find a slightly miffed drunk person who'd had an argument with his missus. I once saw tiny hands reaching out of a sewer grate. Took me a minute before I realized it was a raccoon. Living in a rural village I was taking a late night walk with my GF, when suddenly we hear aloud what we thought was a human scream. Turned out as was a sheep. Jump scared us hard though. A bear right up the street, or, maybe, an empty baby carriage on the side of the road. An old man who walked very aggressively, like Jason from Friday the 13th, but sped up. I was ready to run but I walked past him and nothing happened. Put me on my toes, but holy shit, change your walking form, man. A 7 feet tall male brown kangaroo in the middle of the footpath. Buff as frock, just staring me down. You bet your ass I turned and went the other way. He just went about his business. 2 deer fighting. Then yelling at each other, then having sex. I saw a tarantula use a crosswalk as if it was a law-abiding pedestrian. A man on a bike passed me and he wore a jacket. shoes, and a hat. But no pants or underwear. At first I couldn't believe that I just saw his bare ass. Edit. Typo. A gigantic mother moose and her baby about 30 yards away. Iguana fell out of a tree on an unseasonably cool night. Seeing is scary. But hearing and not seeing is frocking terrifying. Another person walking at night. There was one night where a car stopped up the road. A girl got out, yelled for help, then got back in and they drove off. I have no idea if it was serious or not, considering she got right back in the car. Seen someone overdose. OD. On the sidewalk. Not a pleasant birthday memory. A dude was following me around for a solid 10 minutes in a car. When I confronted the guy, he was just a Uber person who was lost. 2 words. Rabid squirrels. There was an outbreak of rabies in a squirrel population in my neighborhood my senior year of high school. My BF at the time lived about a 20-minute walk away and neither of us drove, so we frequently had to walk through rabid squirrel territory. In the middle of the night, hearing them make noises like something out of a motherfucking zombie movie while skittering above you when it's too dark to see them is horrifying. 0 tenths would not recommend. In college I would walk back from the library very late. One night I was walking back to my dorm and something told me to look up. On top of the parking garage there was a person glaring over looking like they were about to jump. I had no clue what to do, so I called the police. As soon as I looked back up they jumped to safety. I ran up the stairs to find them but couldn't. The police never found them either. Either way, I hope they are okay today. Edit. Forgot to include that on that same night at the neighboring college someone else jumped off a parking garage. I've always wondered if the 2 people are connected. Over 25 years ago, I was walking in a park at night. It was pitch black in this park, no lighting. Other than the moon and the stars on a beautiful autumn night, I couldn't see very well. But I knew the area, and was walking along the road, which ran parallel to a small river. The moonlight would bounce of the water, and all you would hear is the trickle from the slow-running river and slight breeze in the trees. I loved those walks. That was until the one night, in the dead silence and pitch black, I distinctly hear a man's voice out of the woods say very clearly, "Young girls shouldn't go walking alone in the woods at night." I froze. I looked in the direction of the voice and couldn't see a damn thing. I ran home. That was the last evening walk I took in that park. Some guy talking to himself and flogging his back with something whip-like. Clearly he had mental issues, but I didn't find him very threatening. I saw a 400-year-old tree die in an instant. The fungus had been weakening the tree for a while, but I was walking back from office hours during a really bad windstorm. It sounded like lightning. Then we saw no less than half of the tree completely separate and hit the ground. I was walking one night in a pretty dark back road near my house at the time when glowing eyes on a round black body came bulleting at me. I shrieked like a child and felt super dumb when it turned out to be a big-ass black lab who got to my feet and rolled over wagging his tail and wiggling about. He belonged to someone in the neighborhood who was taking him on a walk and ran from them when he saw me. He was a big floofy boy who just wanted love. I seriously felt so embarrassed but also had a laugh. So did his owner, lol. I saw one of those clowns during all the clown hysteria. It was just some teen and his friends goofing around, but it shocked me to the core for a hot minute. I'll walk my dog at night and wear an LED headlamp, mostly so I can see any bare eyes glowing back at me. 20 feet down the ravine about 1/2 mile from home one night there were approximately 30 rabbits' eyes glowing and blinking back at me. Couldn't see the rabbits due to undergrowth, but the eyes, not gonna lie, it got under my skin. Once walking home from the convenience store, a well-known Rottweiler stray dog came sprinting across the street in front of me. When I turned to see what he was running from, I was greeted with an angry skunk running directly into my path. Ran all the way home scared to death of getting sprayed. Someone tried to scare me with an obviously fake gun. I was startled for a microsecond, but not impressed by this as whole behavior. I live in a country town, and I'm male, so I feel reasonably safe taking a nighttime or early morning, before sunrise, walk. If I see someone else we might say good morning, evening as we pass. Never had any reason to be afraid, but one early morning I saw someone come stalking out of the trees as I walked past. It was pretty dark so I couldn't really see much except for an outline. But I had full-on spidey sense. Get the frock out of here. Feeling so I just bolted. No idea if I was actually in danger, but you gotta trust your gut on these things. I saw a man walking down a street with his full penis out, and he was spinning it around like a frocking helicopter in his hand, like a set of keys attached to a bungee cord, right at zipper level. When he saw me, he crammed it back into his pants and ran away. I had the WTF expression frozen on my face for the rest of the night. Close to Halloween I went on a walk with a family member and a bunch of kids were gathered outside their houses with Halloween masks just staring at people walking by. The street I walked down where once there was a cat killer on that street who cut off a cat head and placed it there. I was hanging out with a friend one day and lost track of time. When night fell I got on my bike to ride home and about halfway home I saw a figure standing under a street lamp. Being a teenager I said "Frock that" and went to turn around until I realized I was already too far to turn back. So I turned back around to brave the night and the figure was gone. There was no way he could have ran off in that time without me seeing him. Needless to say I hauled ass home. Not really scary. But once saw two dudes having a legit practice duel with those expensive sturdy lightsabers. A man and a woman taking drugs while I was walking my late dog. They asked me if the dog wanted some, showing the syringe. I laughed it off, but they were adamant. So I ran away. A chemically imbalanced bum raving at the top of his lungs, stumbling in and out of the street. He was a literal bloody mess, stunk to Hades, just me and him on the street at 4:30 a.m. Usually just me and the joggers and that one soccer mom on her bike. Not me. But my friend was near downtown at 3 a.m. on acid and was almost kidnapped. There's a lot of young female kidnappings where we're at, and because he's petite with long hair, he was mistaken as a female target. He managed to run away. But it was of course very traumatizing for him. Finding out my boss lived 3 doors down and he's just human. One day I thought it would be good to try a morning run. Now usually I have to be in the shower at 6:30 and ready to leave home at 7 to catch my morning train. I decided I would leave at 5:30 so I set my analogue alarm. Yes, I am old. To 5:30 a.m. the next day. Due to daylight savings I actually set it back to 4:30. So I am on my morning jog and I mainly jogged through bushland, but at the end of my jog I have to go through this main town area. I briefly remember someone in an alleyway rushing out at me with a knife screaming something I couldn't make out, then just sprinting as fast as I could. I got away with no injuries but just a big scare. Anyway, I am sticking to afternoon jogs now. A group of about 10 kittens just hanging out in the middle of the road. Technically morning, since I get up around 3:30 to 4 a.m. for a run. One time I was running past a neighbor's trash can, and out of the blue, a frocking raccoon pops out like the world's most messed up Jack in the Box and goes scurrying off into the nearby sewer. I also once was on a jog, same subdivision, when I saw a van slowly rolling down the street. Lights off. With masked guys running back and forth from the van to parked cars checking doors and stealing shit. I kept my distance and called the police. They sent an officer who was then able to catch them in the next subdivision. They were armed and driving a stolen vehicle. I had a car driving by stop right by me screaming for help. The guy in the passenger seat was beating up the driver. I yelled at the guy for being an ass and called the cops. He took off running while I consoled the driver. A man turned off his parked car lights and got out just as I passed by. Whenever I looked behind me, I could see him go by behind a tree, building, etc. I wasn't walking, but I go to work at the ass crack of dawn, and once on my way in, I drove past a dude in a full-on black trench coat and black brimmed hat. Start of summer, so the attire wasn't totally appropriate for weather. Not totally scary until I think of when my son was 2 to 3-ish. He used to talk about the black man in the black hat that used to visit him in his room at night. Wasn't scary at the time, but around 2 years ago I went for a walk with my friend and we met with a guy who was pretty nice but ended up being a serial killer in our area targeting old white people. Still never told anyone in my family. Hearing footsteps and turning around to find a hooded figure following me through shortcuts off the sidewalk on my way back from a walk to cool my head after losing my temper. A woman in a nightgown walking out of a cemetery, completely wasted, dirty, and stumbling. Called the cops from a couple block away after I ran the F out of there. A truck full of assholes followed me for a good 20 minutes so they could yell at me and call me fat around 2 a.m. I was walking at 2 a.m. because someone drove by me and yelled fat ass during a daytime walk. I don't walk outside anymore. An adult copperhead, right in the path I would have normally walked through with no light. That night I happened to have a light. Not a walk at night. But I was like 6 or 7. My dad and I were heading home around midnight. We lived in a 6-story building with no elevator. A topless man with a 10-inch cleaver walked down the stairs while we went up. He looked at my dad and we just stood there and let him past. I was shaking. Now thinking about it. He had no apparent bloodstain on him. He must have been late to work at the butcher. I get up early and walk the dog while it's still dark. A block from my house I saw a ghoulish figure at roof level, with glowing eyes. Creeped the hell out of me. My neighbor decided to get an early start on Halloween decorations, and had some kind of flying zombie in his gable. Not really that scary, but the most scared I ever got. Walking my dog, and up ahead, I see a deer. I stop and try to get my dog to see it. He's oblivious to it. so I keep inching closer. As my attention is focused on the deer in front of me, I missed noticing the 2 deer that come crashing into the road about 3 feet from my big frockers, both taller than I am. And they run past me. It's been like 8 years and I still hear the clapping of their hooves on the road. I screamed like a little girl. Walking my dog at night, I was the scariest thing in the dark. We went past a playground and I saw this little kid jump off the climbing bar thing and run off down the street. Thought I'd seen some kind of weird creature, but it turned out to be a boy with long legs. I wasn't wearing my glasses. Wild boar. I have come across moose, but they're absolutely chill by comparison to boar. New Orleans. First week of Mardi Gras and we pass a bar in which a fight had apparently just occurred. One dude comes out of the bar, face bloody, and I've never seen that look in another person's eyes. He was so crazed he was all animal, no human. He started swinging at people on the street, right in front of me and my buddy who didn't see him. I pulled my mate back before he got hit and this guy goes bananas in the street. The cops were nearby so they grabbed him. Walked him to the police car. He wouldn't go in the car door to get inside the patrol car, so one cop takes the guy by the back of the head, slams his face into the trunk, knocks the guy out and they stuff him into the patrol car and drive off. Lasted 20 seconds tops. Seemed like a long time. I once was 7,000 miles away from home in a hotel in the middle of nowhere, Poland, to be precise, and decided to buy some snacks before going to bed. Started walking down the road and every store I've seen earlier that day was closed. Kept walking until I realized I was absolutely alone at 2 a.m. in a place I didn't know. Not a single noise on a dark road next to a forest. I freaked out and turned back to the hotel. But I was far away. Started running completely scared and finally arrived to the hotel sweating and agitated. Didn't know how to explain that nothing happened to me, but I was terrified. Edit. Typo. A possum. He hissed at me. Was walking around a lake in Denver around 10 p.m. Andy saw an older Hasidic Jewish woman sitting on the bench and wondered why she was out so late. When I got closer I realized that she had ugly tattoos on her arm, and when I looked at her eyes, the only part not covered by a scarf, I realized it was a man and got chills down my spine. A couple steps later I heard them mumble and turned around and they were sneaking behind me with a knife out. I turned around and squared up and they ran away, but my adrenaline was pumping through my veins like crazy. Then when I was almost back to my house after a short sprint, a guy walked past me and said, "This guy will blow you," under his breath to me. Decided to just stay in the rest of the night. On a walk at around 2:00 a.m. in Burien, Wa, saw a motionless body in front of a church, got a little closer, stared a little longer. Dead. Called the cops. It scared the hell out of me. Usually just drunks, crackheads and other night walkers. Probably gonna get buried. But once coming late from work, 2 to 3 a.m., I stumbled upon a man completely naked. Well, with a ski mask, casually jogging with his huge dong jumping around. It was winter. Not that running naked is normal in the summer. But you know, and I mean Canadian. 15 centimeters snow, -20°C winter. I remember wondering what the frock was going on when I realized there was a masked naked man running in my direction, but he just awkwardly looked my way and then down. Like ashamed. Found out later he was a serial dig runner and there was a couple of news articles on him. He was seen on the same street.